What's going on, guys?
Man, I feel like it's been months since I've seen you do it.
I think you might be right. How many months, though? That's what I can't remember.
Far too many.
Quite a while.
Yeah, it has been a while, but we are back, baby, and we got some really cool stuff to share with you all today. For those that don't know or remember, my name is Steve Teresi. I'm the VP of Technical Services here at JL Audio. I am in Southern Florida, where our main headquarters is. On the other side of my wall here, we have a special guest who may or may not come and say hello. His name is Eric Cole. You guys should probably already know him and love him. So who else is here? Matt, where you at?
I'm in North Carolina in the Charlotte area. It is currently 94 degrees, so a little warm outside. It might not be that hot. It's the little thermometer sitting in the sun, so it might actually be lying to me.
It is not 94 degrees where you're at.
Yeah, no, it's probably in the 60s or 70s, but it's a nice day out.
And the man, the legend from Southern California, Mr. Rob Haynes.
Howdy, everyone. Nice to see all of you again.
Yes. So we got a cool one today. We recently launched a new version of our TUN software. We're up to, 4.60 now. So we are often in development with some iterations and changes, improvements, and enhancements. This one, I think, if I can summarize it, it's about quality of life. It's the user experience. We put in a lot of things. We've done a lot of trainings over the past several months since we've been away from the live sessions, and we've watched a lot of people using the software, and we worked really hard to try to implement improvements to make their lives easier after watching them work with it. So I'm going to ask that we go ahead and bring up our keynote presentation if we could. So yeah, there we go. All right, hang on. Little out of practice here, So we're going to introduce you guys to TUN 4.60, and I'm going to ask Matt to kind of go through this incredible list of features. I'm not going to read this to you. I think it just makes more sense for us to jump into the software, but you can see that this is not an insignificant list of improvements that we built into the software. More are coming. Next year, I think you'll see some additional improvements, and we may have something else up our sleeve, short sleeves that they may be, in the not too distant future. So why don't we jump over into the software, Matt, and can you guide us through some of these things?
I'd be happy to.
Excellent. So first on our list is the auto set EQ to target placement. We've moved some things, haven't we, Matt?
We sure have, and the move of these improvements that we've made have been really, really good for just everyday usability of TUN software. So the first one you mentioned was auto set EQ to target, and you guys might already have beat me to it, but right in the center of the graph, you can see this nice button right in the middle that says auto set EQ. Previously, in the earlier versions of the software, it's actually moved twice now, but the last position that it was in was the bottom left corner of the graph window. So down here in the bottom corner, and you'd have to go down there and actually select the little undock icon, which has now moved up to here. So you can still undock the EQ panel, and you could still do your auto set EQ from the EQ panel, but we've added this improvement where you can select it right from the main interface. And for just everyday usability of TUN software, when you're going through and you're ready to EQ a channel, that's one less click that you'll have to do because you don't need to undock the EQ panel anymore.
Right. There's a couple of caveats, though, isn't there, Matt? Like, how do you make sure that it's done right?
Well, that's a good question. So you're saying, like, imagine if we didn't have selections here?
Right. So, like, how do we know before we undock it that it's configured with the right data, the right output, and the right target?
Got it. So what Steve's referring to is something that we've had in the software forever called the setup tool. You may think of it as like the new project wizard almost. And to access that, you would go over to the left side of the interface, and you would basically click on this button here. If I close this, we should be able to see what the name of that button is. Start a new project. And when you click on that, it brings you to the setup tool where you can name the project and your inputs and outputs. And when you do that, it automatically configures all of these checkboxes for you. So it'll configure the data, it'll configure your output channel as well as your target. Now, what's cool about this is if you're missing part of this data, like let's say you don't have a target selected, if I press the auto set EQ button, it'll actually undock the EQ panel and highlight what's missing, which is a really nice feature.
Right. So there is a target there, you don't have to undock. You hit auto set EQ, and if you use the setup tool, you're done. It'll auto set the EQ for that band to the target as defined by the setup tool, which is really cool. And it sounds weird when we say it saves you a click or two. It doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but when you're tuning the system, you want to get in and out as fast as possible and get your butt in the seat so you could start enjoying music. And those couple of clicks here or there does save minutes on the tune, and that helps, I think, anyway.
We want to get you listening as quickly as possible.
Correct. Exactly. So you mentioned the undocking thing. Are there any other undockable panels now?
There are. We've added some other improvements, which are really awesome. One of the other panels you can now undock is your input combo box. So if I select this undock icon here, well, problem is I can't see any of these names. So you can actually grab it and you can stretch it out so you could see all of your traces, and you could leave this open and you could actually kind of sit it on the corner of the screen, and you could go through and hide and show any of these traces with the full name exposed, which is really great.
That always bothered me, by the way, that when you had to go and click each one of the things to hide them. I wish there was a new feature that would improve that.
Oh, you mean like this hide all button right here that hides everything on the graph?
Quality of life, folks. We found a way to make it better.
Yes, that is a fantastic improvement. And I can't tell you how many times I've used that feature since we've added it. It's really an awesome feature.
Yeah, and I enjoy that one quite a bit as well. And I like the fact that we can position that. And you'll notice there in the floating panel that Matt's hovering with, it says bottom grid. So you can technically undock for the top grid. If you had like a phase up there, you can undock that and show controls for the top one separate from the bottom. Software smart enough to know which one goes with which. So that's pretty neat.
Yep. Now, speaking of undockable panels, we also added the ability to undock our information display. So this little display here, you could have it on a different monitor. And if you set a cursor, or if you just have your data, if you're moving your cursor across the graph, you can see that the data presents in that little information display. So that may be helpful for you if you want to move your information display to a different monitor. You can totally do that.
It even makes the text a little larger as well than in its normal dock state.
Slightly.
For us, people that need assistance.
I think there's more than one of us that fit into that category there, Rob. So that's awesome. But the undocking thing, I get excited about this. Now, I think a lot of people that are using tuning software like TUN, they're used to having multiple monitors. Obviously, TUN, we have our DSP controls, as well as, there we go, David, right where I'm at. So if you already have multiple monitors, you can undock panels and put them on that second monitor. It's unnecessary for the tuning process, but if you have the real estate and you want to take advantage of it, you can absolutely do that. In fact, Matt, I think there's other things that people may or may not know that they can dock and undock.
Yeah, there's several other undockable areas of the interface, like the crossover panel, the delay polarity panel. If you right-click on any of these, you can click undock all panels, and there you go. And it actually makes the graphs slightly larger as well.
Indeed, yes.
Yep. So that's a nice feature there. And then if you right-click, you can also dock all panels and put them all back.
And just as a side note, when you undock the panels and you position them the way you like them, the software will remember where those docking positions were and restore them when you try to do it again, which is kind of neat. Hey, Matt, I think it's not on script, but there's a feature that maybe we forgot to add to our list. Can you undock the outputs panel?
Yes, I can totally undock the outputs panel.
And can you pull up the little graph icon that's next to the word outputs?
Ah, you're talking about this here? That's a button?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a button. So
that's an OG button from the original launch of VXI.
That is an OG button, but we've enhanced some of that stuff there. Matt, it may be hard for some of our viewers to see. Many of them are probably on their phone, but would you mind kind of going through what's going on there?
Absolutely. So what's interesting about this, I'm going to hide some of these other lines on the screen just to hide them. You can actually see the electrical output of your DSP. So right now it's actually plotting the electrical response that's being sent to the speaker that you're actually measuring acoustically with the microphones. So you can, at a glance, see not only the acoustic response using the microphone and TUN, or the microphones, you know, that you have connected to TUN, but you can also see the electrical output without actually having to measure the electrical channel. And we have this really cool.
This is not, that part's not a new feature. That's been there since the beginning of the software.
Yes. The new feature is plot in measure graph. And if I select that, you can actually see it shows that data on the graph. So you can see overlaid the data that you're sending out versus the data that's coming back. So if I wanted to, let's hide all these and we'll just show one example of this. So our left mid bass channel, which is channel E. Click, click, click. There you go.
See what's happening there, Matt? It's hiding it in the main graph as well.
Correct. Yep. So now you can see the electrical output compared to the actual acoustic measured response. And you can see how much energy and where the energy is being focused on that speaker. So you can see the biggest peak of energy is around 118 hertz. That's electrically going to the speaker. Everything else is acoustic result.
See, that's neat. That gives you some good insight. So if you're tuning a system and you're doing a lot of equalization, you could actually kind of see if it's helping or not by looking at the electrical output versus what the acoustic energy is doing in response to that. So marrying those two together, I think, is a really nice feature that, you know, frankly, we often overlook because it is in a different area, and it's and yeah. So
I think it also, you know, one thing we've kind of been preaching, especially with our Mac certification courses recently, is, you know, the electrical signal and the acoustical data. Those are two completely different things, and that's the visualization of seeing what's actually leaving the amplifier and how the cabin of the vehicle or the room, whatever you're measuring, how that changes that data. It's a good way to kind of understand why we talk about breaking those into two different things to look at.
Correct. There was a comment in the chat that I noticed there, something about the levels being relevant on the plot overlay. There are controls for that. Yep, Jeffrey's comment right there. There are controls to allow you to do an offset to position the data on the graph however you'd like. So, you know, Matt can actually demonstrate by moving that data so you can overlay it close to the acoustic data. Again, it's just to get a relative position on it. So yes, Jeffrey, you do have the ability to change that. So
yeah, I've often heard people say things along the lines of if you set your crossover of, let's say, your tweeter at 4,000, that it should be a 4,000 hertz roll off, right? And that's not always the case, as you can see here. In this subwoofer, we're actually rolling off at 80 hertz with a 12 dB slope, but the acoustic result is much steeper than that. It's actually closer to a 24 dB slope. So it's very interesting because it's not only just the electrical filter, but it's a combination of the electrical, the acoustic, and then the environment on top of that. It's three things that make up the actual acoustic response.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, totally.
So what else do we got? So I'm looking at my notes here. What can you tell me about this enhanced wave file creator? What is that?
Sounds boring.
No, it's not boring, though. It's actually, so you know, being completely open and honest with the group, we've had a wave file creator pretty much since the measure tab was created, but the functionality of it was somewhat compromised, and we finally got around to making it behave the way we want. Would you mind calling that up for us, Matt?
I'd be happy to. So if we go up to the top right corner, right next to the word signal generator, there's the little hamburger here. If
Look at that. That's a neat little shortcut in and of itself.
Yep. Well, that's always been there too.
I know, but most people don't know. So
so if you click on that, you can see that there are some small changes to the actual file create area. So you can select how long you want your file to be. You can select your bit depth for the file. And then you just select what noise type. You can generate sine wave, square wave, pink noise, pink periodic, white periodic. And you can select your frequency as well as your level. So for example, if you said, I need a 0 dB sine wave at 500 hertz or 1,000 hertz, you would just set your signal type to sine wave. You would set your level to 0 dB and then create that file. And it'll create a wave file that you can then just put right onto a USB stick or something else. Maybe you need it to play through the factory system, or maybe you want to use the pink periodic noise And so you want to create a file of that, and that's really good to have there too.
Right. I think that's a nice improvement that was a little overdue, but we finally got around to putting that in. So one that's perhaps slightly less exciting, we have a note about improved scaling. What does that mean? Something to do with fish? What is that?
So that's actually a really cool new feature. So you'll notice here that let's focus on this blue trace on the screen. So I'm going to hide everything except for the blue trace. So previously there used to be 3 buttons here, and we actually got rid of one of those buttons because what we had noticed was there was a lot of confusion about what each button does. And obviously you can always hover over the buttons to see what they do at any time. But what we've done is we've improved how the auto scale y-axis feature works. So if we scale this really, really large, just so that it's different. Now I'm going to go ahead and click the auto scale to y-axis. And you'll notice it scaled the graph appropriately, and it actually left a small gap below the bottom most portion of that data and the highest most portion of the data to the edge of the graph. Previously, it would scale that data to the entire graph, and sometimes that was hard to use.
It was literally peak to peak.
Yeah, so it was more like this or close to that.
And what I found was annoying about that was if you're right now we have our averaging at 4 seconds, but if it was set a little bit faster than that, when you click the button, wherever the peak and the lowest point were, that's what it would scale to. So if it happened to be at a slightly lower position, when you hit that button and it changed, it would be off the screen. And that's kind of not what you were looking for. You wanted to get the data to fit on your screen. So having a little bit of a margin at the top and bottom, I think makes the experience a bit better. So that's an improvement for sure. The button that we got rid of, just so you know, was show all data. And the reason why we got rid of it was because to show all data, it extends down to 10 hertz, which is not very helpful for most everyday application. And it goes all the way out to, what is that, 30,000?
40,000.
40,000, which, as you can see here, makes the graph look really weird. It is representing the true data, but that's not what we normally would look for. We don't really need all of that data. We need the normal range of data, the default scaling, which is 20 to 20,000. So we got rid of that. However, you can still get the data like Matt just demonstrated. You can still see it. It's just not a single click. And this really came from watching people that would scale all the way out and then have to work their way back into a more usable range. This, I think, is a little bit easier. We streamline the interface, and the 2 scaling buttons do a much better job.
So I still have visibility if I want to make sure my car sounds good for the dog.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%, yes. So, Matt, there's another quality of life thing that I think is really neat. So let's go back to the normal default view, please.
All right, so I'm going to auto scale back in, and now I'm just going to – I just wanted to add one quick thing, Steve, that
sure,
we also can do the same thing by right-clicking on the zoom tool where you click on scale setup, and you can manually type in what you want the graph to be scaled to at any time. So you can manually adjust it. So if you just wanted to look at, let's say, 10 hertz to 200 hertz for a subwoofer range, you could type in 10 to 200 and kind of look at that. Yep. So this is another way that you can access that information at any point.
Also a good place to change your deviations. I know we're a default 12 dB. So if you really want to get into the nitty gritty and have a 1 dB per step scale or 3 dB, that's where you'll make that change also.
Yeah, that's really neat. I like that too. So Matt, what I was hoping to do is if you could hide some of the non-live data.
Yeah, you mean like using this hide all button?
Can you then humor me and use the up arrow on the graph to make your data kind of disappear?
I know what you're looking for.
There you go.
Where'd it go?
So we've had what we call data detectors or data detectors as part of the interface all along. That little blue arrow is telling you, the user, that your data is there. It's selected, but it's off the screen to the bottom. And what we were hoping was that you would see that arrow and hit the down arrow on your keyboard. And if you did that, you would eventually find your data, like Matt just demonstrated. Wonderful. However, we also noticed that a lot of people would hover over it and click it. So now what happens? it centers the data like an auto scale to y-axis would do. So whatever data whatever arrow you click on, if there's multiple ones, it'll automatically position that data with the same margins as auto scale to y-axis. So I thought that was, I think that's going to be very much appreciated by many of our people.
So this orange trace down below, the reason that the arrow is not filled in like the blue one was is because it's not the active trace. The active trace is a bit thicker, which is the blue trace. The orange is not an active trace. It's behind the active trace, if that makes sense. There's an order front to back. And right now, the one that's in the front is the highlighted blue one. Right. So if I click on this orange arrow, it'll scale me into the noise floor. So that orange, that was the noise floor with nothing playing. And now if I go and I click on the blue arrow at the top, it brings me back to the multi-mic data that we were measuring a moment ago, and that's now the forefront of the data again.
Yeah, I think that's pretty neat. It's definitely an enhancement that I think people will appreciate. Absolutely. Speaking of enhancements that people will appreciate, if you've ever worked with the scope, there's been some changes and improvements on our scope feature. So Matt, would you mind bringing up the scope real quick?
I will be happy to. So we're going to go to the scope on the top graph. I'll go full screen here. What am I doing?
So we've improved the way the scaling works on the scope graph. So yes. The easiest way to show this, as Matt's doing, is with a sine wave. So he's going to go ahead and turn it on and set the trigger so that things are working.
Okay, so I'm selecting that channel to be the channel that I trigger on, and I'm going to use the rise trigger, the edge trigger, so it locks onto the rise of the sine wave.
Right. Now, conveniently, by default, it fits in there pretty nicely. But Matt, if you change some of the settings in some way that so it's a little harder to see that sine wave, there's a new button over on the right that's it's for scaling. So auto scale y-axis to fit the data, just like you've seen before, and boom, it brings it back up, which is kind of nice. Now, with a sine wave, it's a little bit hard to see the benefit of the next feature, which is the centering on the graph, because it's kind of centered already, and because it's continuous, it's really hard to see a change in that. But as Matt shifts it over, you'll notice the x-axis, the time domain, has shifted over a bit. So 0 is now on the far right instead of being in the center, where on a scope it traditionally is by default. So we have the ability now to center it again, and bang, puts it right back in the center. So if you use the scope a lot, that's a nice improvement. I believe the range of the y-axis has also been improved. Matt, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when we changed that, but now you have the ability to see up to 100 volts peak, which is more than what the JL Audio Max measurement system can accept. So with that being said, you'll never exceed this range.
Right.
If you were to need to measure something bigger, well, then you'll have to, give us a call on our tech support team, and, you can make some attenuators and do some cool stuff, but that's a conversation for another time.
Indeed, indeed. There's another feature that's somewhat buried. It's an important one. Matt, can you bring up meters and gains again?
Okay, meters and gains.
And then on the bottom, put like, actually, you know what? On the top, why don't you put phase or something fun like that?
Yes.
So
yes,
phase on the top, and something like that.
Yes.
So if you like to keep records of the things that you've been working on, we've incorporated a print functionality. Now, I don't know if you're actually printing a lot of paper, but I often will print to a PDF. So we've incorporated a print report function that is part of, Matt, would you go down there and pull up the print report?
I'll be happy to. So if you go to the lower left corner where it says preferences, I click on that, and you'll see this area that says print report. And if I click on print report, it's going to pull up this little window, and I can obviously print it to a piece of paper, but I'm going to select where it says PDF. I'm going to create a PDF, and we're going to call this test print. And I'm going to save this to my desktop so it's easy to find.
Obviously, your operating system will determine what this dialog looks like, but Windows has the same option that you can print to a PDF.
Yep. So now I'm going to go ahead and minimize TUN so I can look at the desktop, and I can see right here, test print. If I open that up, make this bigger. So it gives us the information about the actual system. So you can see here we have George's Charger. It says Dodge Charger. It's a 2019. Nick A installed this. We could see that it's got a C7 three-way front system with 10W7, some VXI amplifiers, and a PAC interface for OEM integration.
So all those times we said don't write bad things about your customers in the notes, this is definitely why.
Exactly. Yes, you don't want to write bad things in the notes because they can access this if they have the amplifier in their possession. So don't write mean things. But if I scroll down, you can see the phase graph here, which is really cool. And if I scroll down some more, you can actually see here the colored traces and the names of the traces. And if we scroll down here, here's the RTA with, again, names of the traces. Everything's
now
colored.
Scott can print that and hang it on his wall.
Yep. And then if we go down, we can actually see all of the settings for each EQ bank, as well as crossovers, delay polarity, and output levels for the entire system. So if you get done a vehicle and it's all tuned and the customer comes in, you can print this and give it to them. Yep. Or if this is your own tune, you can share this online with other people if you wanted to show them what you ended up doing.
Yep. This is pretty neat. I think as time goes forward a little bit, we'll work on improvements on some of the look and feel of all that, but the content is great. The fact that I can basically just take that and put it in my customer's file or put it in my files that I can refer back to, at any given point. I think that's pretty neat. So,
and we've always had this on the fix. It's great that we now have it with VXI.
So Matt, if you go back up to page 2 and 3 real quick.
And tweak 2.
And tweak, yes.
Page 2 and 3. So this one?
2. So 2 would be the upper graph, and then page 3 would be the lower graph. So whatever graphs are visible when you hit the print report function, those are the ones that'll show up. So if you wanted to see the other graphs, you would just go back and print those separately. And then there's lots of PDF editing tools that you could merge those together if you wanted to. So some neat stuff there. So what do you guys think? Pretty cool, huh?
I'd say so.
Yeah. So nice improvements. And again, it's a lot of quality of life improvements on the look and feel of the interface, watching people use it like in real time and seeing what their expectations are as they click in certain areas and it's not behaving the way they want. We're going to try to make that a little bit easier. So if you guys hit some stumbling blocks, appropriate time to fumble, let us know, and we'll do our best to try to make things a little bit easier for you. And when it comes to making things easier, there may be other things coming up that that could be even cooler. So there is something else coming up. We want you guys to all tune in live on November 16th, which is another Thursday at 4:00 Eastern time, just like today's session was. And we'll be introducing a very exciting new feature that's a part of TUN. And we have nothing more to say about that right now, but I have a feeling we'll see all of you back here again on the 16th of November at 4:00, and we're looking forward to seeing you then. So thank you so much for watching today, and we'll catch you then.
See you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.